Hello everyone, I'm Hailing. Welcome to today's episode of 零时差 Talk. We are going to talk about private prisons in the US this time. Statistics show that the US has the highest incarceration rate among the world. The country accounts for only 5% of the world's population, but has nearly a quarter of the world's prison population. Since 2000, the number of inmates housed in private prisons has surged 32% compared to a 3% overall increase in the country's prison population. Why has the number of people incarcerated in private prisons exploded in recent years? Is it because they have better conditions? Well, it's simply not the case. Since the 1980s, the US government, in the name of easing the pressure on detention facilities and reducing the cost of incarceration, incorporated private prisons into national correctional system, thus delegating responsibilities that should be shouldered by the governments to interest groups. Over the past few decades, the self-styled beacon of democracy has sent many prisoners into for-profit private prisons, where they are subject to exploitation and violence. Frederick Bellucci, a former executive of French energy and transport giant Alstom, has described in his book, The American Trap, the high incidence of violent incidents in U.S. private prisons. Conditions in the cell were deteriorating, and verbal arguments and physical aggression became increasingly frequent, Bellucci wrote. He also mentioned that there was a moment where he realized that he became an animal that didn't have freedom and couldn't revolt. The management system of the prison was no less than modern slavery, he said. According to reports of U.S. media CoreCivic, a major private prison operator in the U.S. generated $1.9 billion in revenue in 2020, 82.2% of which came from its private prison operations. A paper published in American academic journal, Journal of Labor Economics, pointed out that when states turn to private prisons, the number of criminals incarcerated rises and the length of sentences increases. Does it sound familiar? Aren't those inmates in private prisons just like slaves who were mercilessly exploited by plantation owners? It seems that the Emancipation Proclamation issued by Abraham Lincoln may not have eradicated slavery, and the dream of Martin Luther King is still a dream. Even after the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, the modern slavery hasn't paused a bit in private prisons in the U.S. According to the Los Angeles Times, inmates in women's prisons in the U.S. were forced to work overtime to produce masks, but were forbidden from wearing them. A female prisoner who was infected with COVID-19 said the prison where she was incarcerated in was like a slave factory, and that the prison system keeps us as a money tree. Why hasn't any authority addressed such appalling human rights violations in private prisons? In the US, private prisons, which turn the country's functions of corrections into a tool for pursuing profit and make punishments for crimes a lucrative business, have become slave factories where human rights violations, forced labor, and violent crimes take place frequently, and racial inequality is worsened. The U.S. often praises itself as a beacon of democracy, but chooses to turn a blind eye to human rights violations at home. No country can beat the U.S. at applying double standard. Has slavery been completely eliminated in the U.S.? Do prisoners deserve to be exploited like this? Is it necessary to use private prisons? What do you think about these issues? Please share with us your ideas at the comment section.